Welcome back then folks to day 4 of pack number 17 in special projects, and this is a build in general, maybe not the specific car for everyone, which people have been asking for a while within special projects, certainly back when I did the 190e Mercedes touring car, the Sierra RS500, the BMW E30 as well, and people asking for a Supra. This one is more so that iconic blue Fujitsu 10 JTC version, and from what I could find online, it depends on the year, depends on the class of racing as to what the specs would be, so I could be wrong. If anyone knows for sure what the specs on this one are, and if I am incorrect, then of course you could put it in the comments. As far as I could tell, you're looking at, in the case of this particular car, about 1,400 kilos and just over 400 horsepower. So that's basically what I've gone to work with. In terms of the point level, it's not crazy high, below 620, and that is, of course, on racing tyres. As far as the livery, of course, a bunch of different players have done this one. You do need the wide body if you want to go for most of them, certainly in the case of this one if you like the look of it. In terms of the build, well, it's an interesting one when we'll take it out to the track in a second because of how quick it is in comparison to the spec, because 1,400 kilos and 400 horsepower doesn't really sound that crazy. For a race car, it's a lot heavier than you'd probably think, and maybe not as powerful either. And if you compare it to some other cars with similar underpinnings, in terms of, at the end of the day, this is a road car that we've built into a race car, well, compare that to like the Mines Evo that I did. You'll see it on Suzuka, for example, and the difference in lap time is quite impressive on this car. Some of that, of course, is the racing tyres, but still. Now, as far as the parts, if we jump down to the Ultimate section first, we've got the titanium rods and pistons. Then if we go back to the sports section, you want your stage 1 weight. Of course, the comfort tyres come on there anyway. For the club sports, we've got the high lift cams, the power restrictor and the ballast. For the semi-racing, we've got the ECU, the racing crank, the fully customised diff. Once again, I've gone for the fully customised manual box for that old school, more raw kind of vibe. I have increased the rigidity on the body of this one. In terms of racing stuff, we've got the polish ports, the balance tuning. I have purchased the intercooler, but you actually don't need to do that because I've removed that to get it down a little bit closer to 400 horses. Then we've got the racing filter, the silencer, the manifold, the pads and the discs. We've got the clutch and flywheel, suspension as well. Like I said, racing hard tyres is what I've gone for. For the extreme section, unsurprisingly, I often like to do it, the steering angle adapter to improve that turn-in. And like I said, we already covered the ultimate section. So it's not crazy in terms of cost. You know, there's no wild multi-million credit engine swap or anything crazy like that. And in terms of specs, it should, if I recall, line up fairly well, I think, with the DTM style cars that I did before, like the Sierra, the M3, the 190e. I don't recall exactly what point level those had, and I do recall people asking for me to update those ones, because those cars in particular seem to have been affected, or I guess I should say those builds, rather than those cars, have been a bit more affected by the physics changes because they were so long ago, so at least you don't have to worry about that, I guess, with this one. So we've got the racing hard tyres on there. For the suspension, huge difference between the front and the back. If we jump out to the menu, it pretty much looks even, and that's part of the reason why we've had to do that change. We've got 85 on the front, 120 on the rear, 6 for anti-roll, so pretty high on that, 30 and 40 for the dampers, 3.15 for the springs, 2 degrees of camber front and rear. As far as the toe, we've towed out 0.10 on the front, towed in 0.30 on the back, so a fairly hefty amount of tow for this one. As far as the diff, you can definitely really change the setup on this car, and it's very responsive to diff tuning when it comes to its cornering, well, of course, in particular. There are certain cars where you can make pretty broad changes to the diff, and it doesn't really feel like it's changed the car all that much. This one is really responsive to it, and with this one I would recommend trying it, see what you think. If you want to change it, of course you can. If in particular you want maybe more oversteer, I don't know why you would, but maybe you would. In terms of this one though, I would strongly recommend trying this first and see what you think though. For me, it's pretty much perfect to what I wanted the car to handle like, at least for my driving style. So we've got 5, 20 and 40 as you can see. As far as the transmission, relatively close ratios for a car with 400 horses, 260 kilometers an hour, so up around like 160, 170-ish miles an hour, at least on paper. That's good enough for most tracks really. As far as the ballast, like I said, if those specs are correct, which I found online, 39 kilos to bring us up to 1400. I've put that all the way to the rear, which is a 52-48 split. Again, from what I could see, that seems to be the kind of split which the car would have had. As far as the ECU, the power restriction, none of that is touched. Unfortunately, even with the aero modifications, or I guess mostly just the wide body on this one, there's no modifiable change to downforce. You could fit the wings and stuff, but obviously that doesn't suit the car. And then as far as the other stuff here, you can see all of the stuff which we do or don't have fitted, most notably having the intercooler not fitted. As I said, I had purchased it, but you don't need to. So as I said, we'll jump out to Suzuka now, and I'll show you what it can do in practice. Now, in terms of the kind of personality and the vibe that I wanted the car to have, I wanted it to be as neutral through corners as possible. So not too much oversteer, not too much understeer. I would say that this diff setup works pretty damn well for that, but like I said, you'll have to give it a try and see what you think. You've got just an ever so slight hint of oversteer, but it's definitely no TVR or something like that in comparison. It's flat and it's fast, and that is also what I wanted. Very minimal body roll, of course, bringing those anti-roll bars way up, bringing the springs way up as well, and that bit of camber really helps with all of that. In terms of the lap though, that is where it gets interesting. Of course with racing tyres it is an advantage, but even so, you compare this to, for example, the Mainz Evo that I did, a couple of other builds like that, cars which more often than not have way more horsepower than this. The Evo's got like 450, I mean the weight isn't that much different on the Evo if I recall correctly, with this being 1400 kilos anyway. Then you've got other builds which I've done here as well, like the Mainz Skyline and various other ones, all have that kind of similar power level, and some have a weight advantage and others are pretty close either way, and yet this is 6 seconds or so quicker than those kind of builds. So it definitely has the pace of a race car, that's for sure. You probably could get a decent amount of use out of it if you maybe lowered the tyres perhaps to sports, then you could easily get it under 600 in career mode, online, whatever you plan to use it for. And I would definitely say that this one is a lot more forgiving than something like the M3 or the 190E or the Sierra, which, being Gran Turismo, probably isn't too surprising because they do tend to favour cars like a Supra. So if you decide to use it, of course, I hope you enjoy it and stick around for the rest of the builds this week. There aren't that many left now, we're well over halfway, and of course check out the ones which we've already done over the week, as well as the hundreds of other ones in the playlist as well. So I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.